Okay, let's play some damn chess. You snapped that stuff from China? Suck my dick, bitch. Oh, no wonder. God fucking damn it. God, fuck it. Uh-oh. God fucking damn it. He's bringing out that whore. God damn it. God fucking damn it. God damn it. God fucking damn it. God damn it. God damn it. I do. God damn it. God fucking damn it. Jesus fucking Christ. You're toast, bitch. I fuck his hoe! Okay, you slant that whore from China. I'm fixing to put your goddamn black ass to abandon in these fucking games, you slut. I ain't taking this shit. Stupid fucking goddamn cunt slut. From China, bitch. Come on, you fucking street whore. Wish pit smell. Wish pit smell. Was pit smell. What's pit smell? Come on, you slut. What's pit smell? Move, you Chinese whore. I just shit in my pants. Suck my dick, bitch. Move that whore! You gotta keep on dreaming. God damn it.
To the Christian religion about Many modern Christians think that being a Christian makes them inherently more moral than those that aren't, something I'm sure many atheists and members of other faiths would probably disagree with. Was this also true for the ancient world? What view did early Christians have of themselves, and how different was this to how they were viewed by the non-Christian population? Join us today on Misquoting Jesus to find out why early Christians were actually viewed as moral reprobates rather than pillars of the community. Welcome to Misquoting Jesus with Bart Ehrman, the only show where a six-time New York Times best-selling author and world-renowned Bible scholar uncovers the many fascinating, little-known facts about the New Testament, the historical Jesus, and the rise of Christianity. I'm your host, Megan Lewis. Let's begin. So, upstanding members of the community, or the local weirdos, how we view ourselves is often at odds with how others view us, and the ancient world was no exception to this. So, how did early Christians actually see themselves, and how far did the rest of the community agree with that? But before we get into all of that, Bart, good morning, how are you today?
Doing well, thanks. Not feeling like a moral reprobate, so that's good.
That's excellent news.
How's your self-image?
Pretty good, actually. Pretty good. Other people would agree I have weird hair and weird glasses, but I like it. So, I wanted to ask.
I was just going to say, it's not a sign of being a reprobate, it's a sign of being like funky.
Thank you. It depends who you ask. I'm sure some people would view me as definitely a moral reprobate. But, so I know that you spend a lot of your summers over in the UK. You have a place in London. How difficult do you find it acclimating when you switch back and forth? Does it take you a long time, or do you kind of get off the plane and you're like, good, I know what I'm doing now?
Yeah, it doesn't take much to acclimate. The big problem that I have is trying to remember always which way to look when I cross the street. First time I went to London, I was like, maybe Sarah and I just got together or something. I got nailed 12 times. It's like, oh my God. And so, luckily in England, the crosswalks in major cities, at the bottom, like at the crosswalk, when you left, it has written down, look right, look left. It's for dumb tourists from everywhere else. Like, oh my God! And so like that too many. And so that part's hard. But I'm pretty used to it now. I've been going over for years now, and I'm even kind of used to driving on the other side of the street, which was also a big problem to start with. But now it's absolutely fine. It's yeah. So, but you're from there, but you don't go over as much, and so I assume it's more like home than anything else.
Walking out of the airport is, I kind of have a big sigh of, not necessarily relief, but it's nice to be home.
Yeah. The funny thing is that when you travel to some country that is completely different from your own, you're expecting it to be weird. And even if you go to Europe, if you go to Italy or someplace and you're not never been there, and it's like it's hard to kind of get adjusted, and you expect it. But since you expect it, it's okay. But in England, like things just come out of you from the blind spot because you think it's all going to be basically the same, and there are things that are slightly different, and like it's just oh my God, like you don't realize. And so, but that still happens to me sometimes. Like, wow, I didn't see that one coming. Both in and words that are being used and stuff, but also customs and things. Just like, so.
I think it took me nearly 2 years after I moved to the US for culture shock to properly hit me. Because coming from the UK, obviously the language is the same, so much of the culture is, if not the same, comparable. And we're so familiar, because we have so much American media on the TV and the cinemas, I felt like I kind of knew what was going on. And then 2 years in, it just kind of hit me very suddenly, a massive amount of culture shock. And it took me a while to kind of process everything. I was very sad for quite a while.
We obviously get much less English TV and English movies here, and so the kind of daily quotidian stuff isn't as obvious to us. English rock was fine when I was a kid. We can handle that fine, but like some of the other stuff, it's just we weren't used to it. So it's funny. I mean, being so similar and so different, especially as you know, being married to one of from the opposite side of the ocean.
It's an experience.
Yes, right.
Okay, we should get into today's episode. So I wanted to open by asking why the reputation of early Christianity is something that we should be talking about and thinking about.
Well, in our world, at least the world I live in the American South, it's often thought that by people who are well-meaning people that being a Christian is a key to morality. It's not that they think that everybody who's not a Christian is a moral reprobate, but they often think, there's no way, kind of no constraints on their behavior, and that those who are Christian, are intent on obeying God, even if they're, even if they have problems. So it's kind of a mindset here that being a Christian is what promotes morality. And so it's very interesting in that light to see if Christianity has always been seen that way, especially from the outside.
And I suspect people will have a vague idea of where we're going with this, given my introduction, looking at how people did, in fact, view early Christians. But before we get to that, what historical sources do we actually have that help us understand this question, how ancient people, non-Christian ancient people, viewed early Christians?
So there's two main sources of information. One would be Christian writings. There are a number of Christian writings, starting in a big way in the 2nd century, that are called apologies. These are defenses of Christianity against the charges of those who oppose them. And you can sort of read these in a mirror way, where you see what's on them, and then you get kind of a mirror reflection. What is it they're arguing against? And so by reading these things in a mirror way, you can see what they're defending themselves against, and by that then you can intuit what people are saying about them. So that's one thing, the Christian apologies. The first apologies we have started in the 2nd century with, say, Justin Martyr in the middle of the 2nd century, and we get apologies by Tertullian and Origen. And so these are helpful works for us. And some people have noted apologetic tendencies within the New Testament itself. For example, in the book of 1 Peter. And so that's helpful. The other thing is we start getting some writings by pagans against Christians. Again, these writings start showing up in the 2nd century. We don't have any actual writings until the end of the 2nd century, but in some cases these are quite graphic in how they describe Christian practices and rituals and behavior, and they attack Christianity, so they can't be trusted as being like particularly reliable historically, that Christians really were doing this stuff. They may have been, some may have been, but they certainly tell us how people were seeing Christians. And so those are the two main sources.
So most Christians today understand that their beliefs are good for the well-being of society and they help make our world a better place. Was that view shared widely among non-Christians in the Roman Empire?
No, not at all. Christians were, from the beginning, really seen as troublemakers and as, in some sense, dangerous on two levels, really. One that's not as relevant to what we want to talk about, but maybe the key level, is that people throughout the empire were polytheistic, and they understood that there were many gods, and that all of these gods deserved to be worshipped. Nobody thought that only their God should be worshipped, but you have to worship the pagan, you have to worship the gods. And virtually everybody did. The people in the Roman world weren't that concerned about Jews not worshiping their gods, because Jews had these ancient traditions, and they were strange, but they, since their traditions were so ancient, that they were an exception to the rule. Otherwise, everybody was expected to worship the gods, and Christians did not. Christians, by and large, were not Jewish. They were Gentiles who were raised in pagan settings, most of them, and they refused to worship the gods, and that was dangerous, because the gods are what make life possible, and they allow us to survive. And we have state gods who are helping the empire thrive, and we have city gods that take care of our city. And so if somebody doesn't worship the gods get angry about that, and it could lead to disaster. So whenever disasters would happen, according to our ancient writers themselves, people would say, that's those Christians in our midst. They won't worship the gods, and the gods would take off about it. And so that's one of the main things that leads to Christian persecution. So in that sense, they're not good for society. Just the opposite. They're a threat to society. But the other thing is that Christians were understood to engage in dangerous practices and very obscene ethical practices. And so their behavior was highly suspect. And there was a general thought then as now, you don't want that kind of behavior in your community, because it might spread and it might lead to people getting hurt or even killed. And so you don't want moral reprobates in your midst. And so that was a problem, and there was talk about that in these sources.
What kinds of things were Christians accused of doing?
Yeah, well, it's got to be beyond belief, really. I mean, generally, they were thought to be, in general terms, they were thought to be standoffish and sectarian, and not fully engaged with their communities. And of course, they couldn't be, because to be engaged in the community meant things like attending city sacrifices and festivals and things in honor of the gods. And that's why you had festivals in the ancient world, and Christians wouldn't come. And so they were thought to be kind of snobbish, and again, it's a form of not worshiping. But there are also stories that all Christians actually were all about, and some of the stories we get are really hard to believe that people thought this about Christians, but they appear to have done. Christians were known to meet in secret. Their meetings were not open, and so it wasn't like you have the Baptist church on the corner you can go to if you feel like. The community, their meetings were for Christians, to support Christians, and to teach each other how to live and how to behave. And the meetings were often held, in the early stages were held when people could come, which would be after work, and so usually after dark. And there was thought to be nefarious activity going on in these communities. You have these secret meetings in the dark, people calling themselves brother and sister, engaging in acts of love together, having love feasts together, and abandoning their families for these other people. And so it was thought, whatever's going on in there can't be good. So rumors started floating around, and some of them rather specific and graphic.
So what kinds of rumors were flying around about these early Christian meetings?
Well, we have a few sources that talk about things. There's one source that it's actually in a Christian book. It's a book called Octavius, which is it's an apology by a fellow who lived in North Africa, Minucius Felix. And he's a Christian author, and he actually quotes an important Roman author named Fronto. He's apparently giving Fronto's version. Fronto was the tutor of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, Marcus Aurelius. So Fronto's a very high-level person who passed on, according to the Octavius, this report that Christians, they met in secret, and they met when it was dark, and they were having this love feast. And according to Fronto, there'd be a gathering of men, women, and children, and they'd have a sumptuous feast. And then after the feast, they would put out the lights. So in the ancient world, you don't have electricity, so how do you put out the lights? And he tells us how. You've got, so you need lights, so you have torches on stands. And he says the way they put out the lights is they have a dog leashed to each of the light stands with torches on them. And when time came, they'd take a piece of meat and throw it beyond the reach of the leash. So the dog would run after the meat and knock over the torch and put out the lights. And when that happened, they started engaging in random acts of copulation with one another. Just pick your partner in the dark and have sex with them. And this is what's happening at their weekly meetings that Christians did call them agape meals, or just agapes. Agape is the word for love. So these were love meals in the Christian tradition. That's because they're showing their Christian love for each other, just as Christ showed his love by dying. They have a Eucharist, a communion meal together, shared, and they to show their love for each other. But for the outside rumors, for people who are hearing this stuff, this is what they say they're doing.
That sounds like quite the weekly party.
It's quite a weekly party, and
do we see other rumors, or is this like the most extreme?
Yeah, there's a more extreme one. So according to Fronto, there's an initiation rite to get into the Christian community, and it's really quite gory and disturbing. He says that they take a young child and they cover the child with flour. And they get loud music going. They have music players playing loud music, and this child is kind of in a container of some kind. And the participants who are being initiated into the community are told to beat this object. this flower-covered child, and then they kill it, and they consume its limbs, and that this is the initiation rite to join the Christian community. There are debates about this. I mean, there are a few scholars that say, maybe that happened, and I don't think so. But there are two kind of schools of thought on this. One is that's probably the dominant one now, is that this kind of accusation that you kill babies and eat them was commonly thrown out about people in the ancient world you didn't like. Like it's just the kind of a standard trope to think of the worst thing you can come up with to say how awful somebody is, or a particular group was, and talk about them killing babies and eating them. And so a very common view is that this is just that kind of polemic leveled against the Christians. And that may be right. The other option that is a little more scintillating and interesting is that it could be based on Christian actual practices, where Christians are known to have these secret meetings where they eat the blood of the Son, they drink the blood of the Son of God, and they eat his flesh. And so they're drinking his blood and eating his flesh, the Son of God, and somehow that's transmogrified into the idea that they're actually killing babies and eating them. So it could be a combination of the two, it could be one or the other.
Thank you. We're going to take a very brief break, and then we'll be right back to talk about what impact these kinds of rumors would have had on a community and how Christians responded to these accusations.
If you're interested in the Gospels of the New Testament, the book of Genesis, the resurrection of Jesus, the historicity of the Exodus, or anything else connected with the Bible, you should check out my online courses, where I cover all these topics and more. If you'd like to learn about the courses, check them out at bartherman.com. You can receive a discount on any of your purchases simply by entering the code MJPodcast.
And we are back. So I know that there were other kind of mystery cults that met in secret and had initiation rituals, that Mithras and Isis both had these kinds of groups. Were these viewed with the same suspicion as Christianity, or was Christianity set apart because of this insistence on monotheism?
There are occasions when one of these mystery groups was opposed and seemed to be a threat. So the most famous one is an account that's described by the historian Livy that happened in Rome a couple hundred years before Jesus, where there was a group of worshippers of the god Dionysus who engaged in very similar practices to these being described by the Christians, according to the sources. But the Roman Senate found out about it and quashed it rather severely. And so this group of people, they were expelled, and some of them were executed for this kind of reprobate activity. Most mystery cults did not have this kind of reputation. We call them mystery cults. The word mystery actually comes from the Greek word meaning an initiation. You had to be initiated into these groups. You couldn't just go to their services. You had to have an initiation process, and so they were called mysteries. But they're mysteries in a sense that makes sense as well, because we don't know much about them. We don't have a lot of written material. You mentioned the Mithraists, the follower of Mithras in the Roman world. We don't have any written texts that give us much information about what they were actually doing. But these other cults were not suspicious because even though they were secret, they were open to anybody. I mean, some of the biggest ones were like you'd have thousands of people join at a time, and you just decided to join, and you're going to worship this god or this goddess, and there's an initiation rite, but it's perfectly open and above ground. And the insiders knew what it was all about, and they knew there's nothing crazy going on. So in that sense, Christianity is more like these Dionysiacs in the Livy reports, and so there are some groups, most groups weren't treated this way.
Thank you. Did these rumors have any bearing on the early Christian persecutions?
Yeah, they appear to have. I mean, it's the kind of thing where the persecutions started out at the ground level. The early persecutions of Christians were not sponsored by emperors, or officials for the most part. You don't have empire-wide persecutions where you have an emperor saying, look, we got to get rid of these people until toward the end of the 3rd century. And by that time, there had been local opposition against Christians, as far back as the New Testament. I mean, our earliest writer, Paul, faced local opposition. And so when you're talking about ground level opposition, then rumors obviously are a very dangerous thing, because it only takes, a small group of people to think that these Christians are a problem to set one of their houses on fire and that kind of thing. And so they did have an effect. And then as time went on, more people started thinking it might be right. And so it did have some effect on persecution, although I think the main reason for the persecutions had to do with failing to worship the state gods.
So how did these early Christians respond to the accusations being levelled against them? Really, what is the comeback? You can't invite people to come and witness your ceremonies for themselves because they're not Christians, they're not allowed to be there.
Yeah, well, you insist on your high morality, and you explain what really happens, and you hope that does the trick. And so that's what they do. And so you have someone like Justin Martyr, who wrote two apologetic works that we have, and they're usually just called the First and the Second Apology. But in the First Apology, the longer of the two, he describes what actually happens at the sacred meal, where and he talks about how they give, what kind of prayers of thanks they give for the bread and the wine, and how they, and how it happens, and it's completely innocent and above board. And one of the things that happens in these meetings is that they take vows with one another to be ethical and to be moral human beings. And so you have descriptions of what actually happened, but then you have these apologists who really insist that we are so much more moral than anybody else in the world. And they take some interesting tacks to do this. So they'll say things like, look, you're opposed to adultery. We're opposed to adultery. Our rule is you can't even lust after another person. That's way beyond what you've got. You say you can't even murder. I mean, our leader said you can't even get angry. And you kind of go down the list of how we're far moral than you. But then they ratcheted it up a notch and saying, man, we are so much more moral than your gods. So they start telling these myths where Zeus came down, and raped some woman and then ran off with her, and or somebody gets really ticked off someone else and murders them. And it's like all these stories about the gods. And this is what your gods are doing. And we don't even, this is what we're doing. And so we are, and they end up saying, we're the most moral people. And some apologists start saying it's precisely because we are moral that God has decided not yet to destroy the earth, because there's still something good in it. Because if we weren't here, it'd be rotten to the core, and God would just wipe you all out. So they insist on their high morality and that, in some ways, leads to Christians actually adopting views that would have been extreme in the ancient world, where they say things like, Christians will say, you practice exposing children. If a family has a child that they can't support, they would leave the child out, hopefully to be picked up by somebody, although when they get picked up, often they get picked up as a slave, but at least the child survives. And Christians said, and children would die. And Christians say, you commit infanticide. So we don't even not commit infanticide. We don't allow abortions. And so this is when the kind of Christian opposition to abortion starts up to show that the one-upmanship. We not only don't do infanticide, we don't even kill fetuses. And so it's a one-upmanship, and that becomes then the kind of a Christian method. We're more moral than anyone else.
It strikes me that this kind of proclamation of one's own moral superiority, even over and above someone else's deity, is maybe not the best way to make friends. Did this approach actually succeed in changing their public perception?
It's interesting. These apologies are almost always addressed to a high-ranking Roman official. Justin Martyr addresses his to the emperors. So the idea that a book like this is going to be actually handed over to an emperor who's going to sit around some Saturday afternoon and read it is ridiculous. There's no way. And so these books really seem to be written for the same reason that modern apologists write their books. And so Christian, especially evangelical Christian apologists, write their books to show the superiority of Christianity, to show that it is philosophically sensible, to make arguments for the existence of God and arguments for the resurrection of Jesus. And these arguments, and so these books are addressing outsiders, but in fact they're written for insiders. And so it's the insiders who read these books, but the reason they read them is to have ammunition to use against the outsiders. It's really hard to believe that you can convince somebody that Christianity is superior simply by detailing your ethical greatness, and so I don't think it probably had an effect that way. What ended up having an effect was that Christianity spread over these years and grew and grew and grew. More people joined the community, and then it became more obvious that, in fact, it wasn't a bunch of just crazy moral reprobates. That, your next door neighbor, the guy who's, practicing law or something, he's a Christian. So that's really what ended up convincing people, I think.
And do historians think that the Roman world became more moral once it became a Christian?
No, not really. One way that's been studied is by looking at imperial policies before and after the emperors became Christian.
God fucking.
There's one author who's a social historian at Yale who did a study of this. His name's Ramsay McMullen. And he wrote a really interesting article about what difference Christianity made after Constantine converted. What kind of impact did it have on things like sexual ethics, or on, kind of go down your list of various kinds of forms of morality, injustice, or harsh penalties and things like that. What kind of difference did it make? And in fact, it didn't make much difference at all on slavery. For example, what kind of impact did it have? It didn't really have one. And so there wasn't a lot to show that Christians were morally superior. And I think that's probably right, that most pagans were like most Christians today. They had a sense of right and wrong, and pretty much they tried to do the things that were right. There are many, many, many exceptions to that, but basically that was the sense, is that that society needs ethical people, and so we encourage ethical behavior. So society did that, and by and large, the pagan community was no less ethical than the Christian community, and vice versa. There were different standards, and some of the changing Christian standards actually improved the world in some ways. This is the thesis of the book I'm writing right now. I'm trying to argue that at least in one significant way, Christian altruism was very different from altruism you'd find in the greater world, and it made a huge difference on social agendas and on institutions and governmental spending and things. But in terms of personal morality, pretty much, people were as moral then as they are now, or immoral.
Well, thank you very much for that, but we're going to take a very brief break and then be back with more information about an upcoming event, so please stick with us.
This is Bart's Weekly Update, where we get to catch up on all the latest about Dr. Ehrman's book releases, speaking engagements, ehrmanblog.org happenings, and online course launches.
Jesus.
Okay, and we are back. So this is people's last chance to sign up for When Does Life Begin, which is your course that will be recorded on June 2nd. I wanted to ask what kinds of passages you'll be addressing for this question.
Well, one thing I'm going to do is talk about passages that people use to say that the unborn is a full human being. And they often involve things like passages where a poet will praise God for, that you formed me in my mother's womb, or you knew me before I was in my mother's womb, and to see what we can actually say about those metaphors and what they show us about the status of the unborn. But then I'll also look at a couple passages in Scripture, the Hebrew Bible, which are particularly relevant. These are passages that are found in the law of Moses that involve women who are pregnant, who are forced to miscarry, and what these passages say about what they indicate about whether the child that is prematurely born and dies, whether the child is considered to be a human or not. That and other passages, including the creation of human beings, Adam and Eve. That also, as it turns out, has some relevance to it. So I'll go over the passages, and I'll try to do it fairly, because I don't have a particular stake in what the Bible considers to be the beginning of human life, because I base judgments about that myself on more things like science than I do on the Bible. But it is worthwhile knowing what the biblical view is, because I think that if people want to quote the Bible, they ought to at least quote it correctly.
Thank you. And now this, for people who missed our announcement last week, is a 1-hour lecture that will be recorded live on June 2nd. The recording will be available afterwards for people who can't attend virtually, as it were. It costs a whole $14.95, so it really is not terribly expensive. And if you are considering purchasing more of Bart's courses, I think this is probably going to be an excellent taster for you to see if it's something that you would find useful and interesting. You can register over at barterman.com/life, and as ever, the podcast code is MJPodcast, which will get you another discount from the course price. We are now going to go to an Outsmart Bart bonus round, which is where a listener will send in 3 questions about the New Testament, preferably to try and catch Bart out and test his knowledge. So we will get to that.
Dr. Ehrman has written 6 New York Times best-selling books and holds a PhD from Princeton Theological Seminary. It's not often you'll see him made a fool, but it doesn't hurt to try. It's time for Outsmart Bart.
God fucking damn.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Outsmart Bart. Question 1. What does Jesus promise the disciples in John 16:12-14?
I don't know. I'll tell you what I do know. I don't know the exact verses. John 16 is part of the farewell discourse in the Gospel of John. It's an extended speech of Jesus. That's the longest speech of Jesus in the New Testament. It begins in chapter 13 with Jesus washing the feet of the disciples, and to show that they're to be servants of others. They're supposed to serve others as slaves, the way he's doing to them by washing their feet. But then he launches into this talk in chapter 13 that goes through chapter 14 and chapter 15 and chapter 16, and then he breaks into a prayer in chapter 17, and this entire 5-chapter thing is one thing with Jesus talking the whole time. So one of the tricky things about this whole thing is that in chapter 14 and 16, the message is basically the same. So much so that scholars have suspected that there were 2 versions of what Jesus said at this occasion that were in circulation, and the author decided just to include both of them, even though it's the same thing in different words. And so what's going on in these chapters, including in chapter 16, is Jesus says that he is going to be leaving the world, but they are not to fear. The world hates them, but the Holy Spirit is going to come as a replacement for him. The Comforter, the Paraclete, the Advocate is going to come in Jesus' stead, and the Spirit will empower them to do great works. As slaves, the way he's doing to them by washing their feet. But then he starts
Welcome back to Outsmart Bart. Question 1. What does Jesus promise the disciples in John 16:12-14?
I don't know. I'll tell you what I do know. I don't know the exact verses. John 16 is part of the farewell discourse in the Gospel of John. It's an extended speech of Jesus. That's the longest speech of Jesus in the New Testament. It begins in chapter 13 with Jesus washing the feet of the disciples, and to show that they're to be servants of others. They're supposed to serve others as slaves, the way he's doing to them by washing their feet. But then he launches into this talk in chapter 13 that goes through chapter 14 and chapter 15 and chapter 16, and then he breaks into a prayer in chapter 17, and this entire 5-chapter thing is one thing with Jesus talking the whole time. So one of the tricky things about this whole thing is that in chapter 14 and 16, the message is basically the same. So much so that scholars have suspected that there were two versions of what Jesus said at this occasion that were in tricky thing. The entire 5-chapter thing is one thing with Jesus talking the whole time. So one of the tricky things about this whole thing is that in chapter 14 and 16, the message is basically the same. So much so that scholars have suspected that there were two versions of what Jesus said at this occasion that were in circulation, and the author decided just to include both of them, even though it's the same thing in different words. And so what's going on in these chapters, including in chapter 16, is Jesus says that he is going to be leaving the world, but they are not to fear. The world hates them, but the Holy Spirit is going to come as a replacement for him. The Comforter, the Paraclete, the Advocate is going to come in Jesus' stead, and the Spirit will empower them to do great works, and he will comfort them, and even though the world hates them, this will show that they're on the side of God, and so they're not to fear, because this is what's going to happen. So boom, 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 boom. He does that in chapter 14, he does that in chapter 16, and I assume those verses are somewhere in there.
They are. The answer provided by the listener is to send the Holy Spirit to guide them into all truth. So I'm going to take your answer as correct, because it's sending the Holy Spirit to them after Jesus' demise. Okay, question 2. What does it say at the beginning of Serapian's quote in Eusebius that you discussed in an earlier podcast?
What does it say at the beginning of Serapian's quote? I don't know what the question means. I'm sorry, I don't know what the question.
No, that's fair.
No, I mean, it would be a very good question, but I'm not quite sure what it's asking. So I will say what it's talking about, which is kind of what I did in the first question. But what it's talking about is this. Eusebius is dealing with the issue of a church father named Serapion, who was a bishop of Antioch in Syria. And the episode about Serapion that Eusebius is talking about involves a Gospel of Peter. And so Eusebius, for those who don't know, he wrote the first history of Christianity around the year 300, early 4th century. Eusebius is called the father of church history because he wrote this 10-volume book about the history of the church from Jesus' day up to his own. And so he has lots of episodes. And this one about Serapion is about the Gospel of Peter, because Serapion was the bishop who went on a tour around the various villages and towns that were under his jurisdiction. And one of the towns was a place called Rosas. And Rosas, while he was there, he found out there was a division in the church because some people in the church thought that they should be able to use a gospel that they had written by Peter for understanding the truth and in the worship services, and another group in the church said, no, you shouldn't be using that. And so there were debates, and Serapion said, look, if you've got a gospel written by Peter, it's fine. Why wouldn't that be that's no problem. So he said, just let them use it. He went back home to Antioch, and some informers came and told him that, in fact, this Gospel of Peter is a docetic book. It's used by people who don't believe that Jesus was an actual human being, but there was so much God that he wasn't fully human. And so Serapion read the book, and he realized it could be used for false purposes, for heretical purposes, and so then in this letter he forbade the book. And then Eusebius quotes the letter. He tells the story, and he quotes the letter. So that's the story, but I don't know when he says at the beginning what he means.
So the answer provided is that the words of the apostles are received as Jesus himself, but those falsely inscribed are rejected because they were not handed down.
Yeah. That's right. So he's saying that because what he's going to argue is that the Gospel of Peter was not really written by Peter. If it had been written by Peter, then you would accept the words as Jesus' own words. But since it wasn't, it's falsely authored, it's a forgery, then you can't trust it.
The final question is also on Serapion. What dubious assumption is Serapion making here about the text?
So, yeah, I mean, Eusebius doesn't say this, but this is what I think is the dubious assumption. What Serapion's done is he's read the book. He's read this Gospel of Peter. By the way, I should point out, we appear to have this Gospel of Peter now. It was discovered in the 1880s. We don't have the whole thing. We only have 10 pages of it. and it's 10 pages that deal with Jesus' trial, death, and resurrection. So it's a key part, but it's just a fragmentary part of it, just 10 pages of it. Anyway, so what happened was Serapion read this gospel, he would have had the whole thing, and he decided that in fact it could be used for docetic purposes. It could be used to argue that Jesus wasn't really a human being. And so he decided that Peter could not have been the author, and so it cannot be seen as an authoritative book. The mistake he made, or the problematic thing, is that he assumed that... Anyway, so what happened was Serapion read this gospel, he would have had the whole thing, and he decided that in fact it could be used for docetic purposes. It could be used to argue that Jesus wasn't really a human being. And so he decided that Peter could not have been the author, and so it cannot be seen as an authoritative book. The mistake he made, or the problematic thing, is that he assumed that if the gospel embraced a theological view that he, Serapion, disagreed with, then it could not have been written by an apostle.
Damn it.
Serapion, at the end of the 2nd century, is assuming that Peter would have had his own, Serapion's own theology. And so if there's a book that doesn't have his theology, it could not have been written by Peter. So he's making a decision about the author based on his own theological views. That's a mistake. And I know almost nobody's even noticed that mistake until like recent times. And so it's a categorical mistake.
And that is indeed the answer that the listener provided. So I am sorry, dear listener, you did not manage to outsmart Bart this week. Bart got 2 out of 3 questions, so I'm giving this round to you. If you have questions, if you want to try and outsmart Bart, you can go to www.barterman.com/ask Bart to submit your questions there. Now, before we finish for the week, Bart, would you mind just summarizing what we spoke about?
Yeah, we're talking about the ethics of early Christians and how they were perceived by outsiders. Today, and in antiquity, people who are Christian assumed that Christianity brings a high level of morality with it. In early centuries, there were pagan opponents of Christianity who did not think so. They thought, in fact, that Christians were engaged in practices that were quite nefarious and dangerous to society. So we talked about what those views were, why they had them, and how Christians responded.
Thank you, Bart, so much. Audience, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Remember, you can use the code MJPodcast for a discount on all of Bart's courses over at www.barterman.com. Misquoting Jesus will be back next week. Bart, what are we talking about next time? To the Christian religion.
God damn it.
Let's jump right into our first caller. We have Sherry in Mount Vernon, Illinois. Sherry, you're live with Eric and Thomas. How are you doing?
Hello, and it's Cherie.
Cherie, sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, so what did you want to talk about today?
Well, I have a friend, Janet, and yesterday we were
Janet
discussing,
Uzi.
she wanted to know how did I know that God was real?
Mm-hmm.
Because she was saying that he was not. Well, she didn't say that he did not exist, but she wanted me to prove to her that he did.
Okay.
And there is no way to prove to somebody something exists that you can't tangibly, see or touch. But I was telling her, I know that he is real because I feel him inside of me. And she said that's not good enough for her,
So can I ask you, Cherie, is there anything else in your life that you hold to that standard?
as far as?
Well, so if I were to say, I believe in Muhammad, and I know Muhammad is true even though I can't prove it, or I believe in Zeus or Thor. You know, I don't have any tangential proof, but I know in my heart that it's true. Would you accept those as true?
Well, I don't know. I believe in supernatural. I mean, whatever somebody's higher power is, I do believe that they have one. Now, what that higher power is,
bullshit.
They have, I'm not sure, but for me, it's God. But not only that, not only
hold on. Let's nail down the specific really quick, because I just want to make sure that I got you right. Were you saying that if somebody says that they believe in Thor, God of Thunder, and they know in their heart it's true, that you would accept that there is a God flying around with a hammer, Mjolnir, and can control the elements? Like,
I'm not saying that. If they gave me experience, like for example, I had a child, my first son. He almost died, like literally. He weighed 2 pounds and 14 ounces. My faith at that time wasn't really strong, but it was strong enough where I knew to fast and to pray. So I did that for 24 hours. And the next phone call that I got, well, let me back up. Before that, the hospital called and was like, well, he may not make it, and he has liver disease and something else. And basically they thought that he would die. So I prayed, I fasted, and then the next phone call that I got, it was like, I don't know what happened yesterday, but it's completely gone. He did a 360, and he's doing fine, and today he is 27. So either by coincidence that happened, or I don't know, but...
Oh, no. There's a very good explanation.
Shuri, I want to ask you a question, though, before we dive into that, and that's, if you had fasted and he had died, would that be evidence for you that no God existed?
No, because in the Bible, David had fasted for his son.
So it sounds like no matter how the outcome turned out, that your belief in a deity is based on more than just that.
It's just experience afterwards. You know, I've seen several miracles, not just one, but many. When people call upon God, I have seen it work.
Tell us the most convincing.
Yeah, what's your best?
A baby. She was in a coma for I think 6 or 7 months.
Okay.
And the mother of the child wanted to take the baby out the hospital to her church. But the doctors kept telling her, no, don't do that. Well, eventually she did.
Okay.
And it's on YouTube, too. But anyway, she took the baby to the church, and then the minister lady, she prayed over that child. And, I mean, service was going on like nothing was happening. And while she's praying and singing and glorifying, the baby just wakes up.
Okay.
After all this time,
Shuri,
she just
do you
wakes
have...
up.
I'm curious if you have miracles that you've witnessed personally, because there's a lot of stuff online that I can point to that seems like excellent proof of something, but we don't know the backstory, we don't know the details. Because I've seen stories of this type of stuff happening where a pastor claimed to raise a baby from the dead, and it turned out that he had drugged the baby, and it was horrific, but it went viral on YouTube. I'm kind of curious, because I can look up videos like that online too, and I think what Eric and I are more wondering is, are there miracles that you've witnessed personally in your life, either that you've been healed and that's the only explanation that you have, or that someone that you witnessed, you saw it firsthand? If there's stuff like that
you are not going to trap me.
I have a friend in Chicago. He was shot 9 times.
Okay, hold on a second.
And pronounced dead at the hospital.
Shuri?
Like literally. Yes, I'm here.
Thomas asked you a question.
Oh, I'm trying to answer it. What did he say?
Let her continue.
Okay, sorry. I
God
thought
damn it.
I thought he said any personal experiences for me.
Jesus.
Okay, I apologize. Go ahead.
Well, this is a personal experience. This isn't something that I saw on YouTube. But I had a friend. He was shot 9 times. When we got to the hospital, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. dead. So his mom, his father, I believe it was his aunt, they called in the pastor.
Fucking Christ.
I don't know what took place behind those doors because I wasn't behind there. But all I know is when they came back out, they were crying. He's breathing now and this and that. So who else could have done that? I mean, he was pronounced
he was
dead
at a hospital, wasn't he?
And they said that he was dead.
He had doctors
and
around him,
they let the
didn't
parents in the room. They let the pastor in the room. It was no doctors there. It was just those three. And whatever they did back there, I don't know. When they came out, that man was breathing.
They probably doctored. I mean, let's.
No doctors in the room.
There are doctors in a hospital, I would presume, right? So
yes, but they pronounced him dead.
Yes.
And let the family come in and say goodbyes and whatever.
So would you agree that there are people who are pronounced dead who then it turns out aren't? Right? Like we have a history in human society of people being pronounced dead, right?
There were cases, Cherie, there have been cases in human history where they used to bury coffins in, I believe in the UK, with bells next to the coffin, because every once in a while they would bury someone alive and the person would wake up and they were in some form of a coma and they came back. And, the human body, it's extremely resilient. And there are times when, I'm not sure if you've studied much on near-death experiences, but it happens all the time where people, they appear to die. They're not dead. It's near death. But their heart stops, and it seems like their vital functions are ceasing, and from an outside perspective, it seems like they're dead, and then they come back. And the insane thing about this is that whatever culture they're in, whether it's in the United States, whether they were brought up in a Christian household, whether they're in the Middle East and were brought up Muslim, whether they were born in India and were brought up Hindu, the experiences that they have upon death almost always mirror exactly the cultural influences that they've been exposed to. So for you telling me that story, I've heard very, very similar stories to that coming from people in India. And to them, that's a just absolute proof that, Shiva and Brahman and all these other gods are real, and that the Hindu afterlife is real. And I want to know personally, because to me, I hear both of those stories, and I don't think that they're mutually compatible. I don't think that the God of the Bible and the Hindu gods can both be real at the same time.
Amen.
And if one is saying that the other is wrong, and they can't both be right, is it possible that they're both wrong, and that there's something going on neurologically in our brains, all of the chemical storm that's occurring? You have all of these psychoactive chemicals in your brain that are naturally created, and when you die or when you come close to death, your brain starts freaking out and panicking, and it just releases this flood of chemicals that can explain a lot of this stuff and can be recreated. Scientists can induce feelings of having an out-of-body experience or having a near-death experience and having this feeling like you're moving towards a light going through a tunnel and stuff. They can do that by triggering regions of the brain. And what I'm curious about is how this story is proof of a specific deity, or if maybe there's other options that might explain it without having to suspend our everything that we know about how the natural world works.
Well, like I said, that's just one of many experiences. And before we go any further, I used to be just like you. I didn't believe. I was not raised to believe in not only God but in nothing. My household was horrible.
Sherry.
And I found God on my own.
Cherie.
Yes.
You know nothing about us.
Well, I really don't want to know anything about you, because you're going with something that is against what I
Thomas
believe.
And I were both born and raised Christians.
Well, I wasn't.
So we're nothing like you.
We're total opposites.
We come from very different backgrounds. That doesn't mean that we can't explore how the world works together and hopefully get get
But
somewhere.
I'm saying I'm opposite from you. You two were raised Christians. I was not raised that way.
Right.
So we came from two different backgrounds totally.
But we live in a world.
I didn't get to be a Christ-like individual until I got older.
Sheree,
which I found God by myself.
We both
not
live.
Because I was taught or forced to know God, because that's not true for me.
We both live in the same world with the same facts, right? I mean, it's not.
I don't know
truth is not different.
Lisa said I know nothing about you.
Okay.
So if I know nothing about you, I don't know what world that you live in. I just know the world that I live in.
I'm talking about a world where you can point at a place on a map and we can both go there. 2 + 2 = 4. When you drop something, it goes down because of gravity that we share, right? We share a world together with factual information about it that we can both come to understand.
Where are you getting your facts from?
Well, it doesn't. He's not talking about the sources that we go to for studying the world. He's talking about our world, our cosmos. We're in the same thing. We're in this place together.
Would you agree with that? That we both live in the same world, the factual world?
We're not in a world that operates differently from the world that you're in. The rules, the laws of physics apply equally to both of us.
I agree with that.
Okay. So, if we can agree there, then we can start to take apart other things. Now, there's a reason why both of us came up with possible situations in which your story could have been not, created, supernatural.
Now, fuck it, but bring that pawn down there.
It could have not, but it also could have been.
Oh, sure.
Nobody can prove that it wasn't.
Well, we don't live like that, though. And I would actually say that you don't either.
That. If you can't tell me, if I tell you that the sky was blue, and you say, no, Sheree, it's yellow, you're going to have to prove to me that it's yellow. You just can't tell me, well, that's not really blue, you're not really seeing blue.
Sheree, you're absolutely right.
But I'm seeing yellow.
Sheree, you're right.
So
you're absolutely right. So you're telling me there's a God.
That it wasn't God.
Sheree, you're telling me there's a God, and I'm saying you have to prove it. You're absolutely right.
If this was a courtroom,
I am a living proof. I am a living proof.
Then,
Sheree, if this was a courtroom and someone said that you committed a crime, the burden of proof is on them to show that you committed the crime. It's not on you to defend yourself. You are by default innocent. So we live in a world where extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And we're able to test the world, and we're able to experiment and see how stuff works, and we're able to measure it and build different machines and tools to get more accurate understandings of how this world works. And so to come along and say that everything that we know about the natural world is suddenly turned on its head and that there are these supernatural things that can't be explained except for by a deity, that's an extraordinary claim. And it requires a tremendous burden of proof to show that that's the case. For us, we say, okay, what requires more assumptions? We can look at a supernatural claim, and I'll bring up the virgin birth. We can say all the laws of anatomy and biology and genetics and how, fertility works and stuff, if we have to throw all of that out the window to assume that there was a virgin birth. Or what's more likely, that either the story is mythological, it's legendary, or that, to put it bluntly, that a Jewish minx would tell a lie. And I just think that there are much easier ways to explain for this stuff without having to suspend our understanding of the world. And until it can be demonstrated, until it can be proven, then I think the safest bet is to operate in a way that, once we see evidence, then we're happy to change our position.
Yeah.
So how y'all remind me of my kids. I have been diagnosed with I'm serious. I have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and my children, because I can't take no X-ray of my brain to show them, okay, my mind is, broken here. They say, oh, Mom, I can't see it, so it's not true.
Whoa.
There is no way I can X-ray my brain and show them, okay, it's broken here, because I cannot do that. But just because I cannot do that does not mean that it's not true.
Okay. So,
my feelings, the way that I feel, the doctors feel like, well, you must have this or you must have that.
Sheree?
Yes?
So I feel like we're talking past each other, and I want to address this. right?
Stupid bitch.
I bring this up on the show a lot, but I'm assuming you don't watch the show. Do you know what epistemology is?
No.
It's the study of knowledge. It's how you know what you know, the toolbox that you use, right, to determine what is true and what is not true about the world around you. Right? Every time you experience something in your life, you're reaching into that toolbox, and you're pulling out the best tool that you have to determine whether or not something is true.
Spit.
Okay. So it sounds like we're using different tools. Would you agree with that? Because you gave us what sounds like clear evidence to you that a God is true, and we're not really accepting that, and it feels like there's a misunderstanding. Like, you know, we're not using your tools and you're not using ours. Would you agree that that probably summarizes what's going on here?
That probably is the case. And no matter what I say, you're going to say what you have to say because that's your belief. No matter what you say to me, I'm going to say what I say because it's my belief.
No, Cherie, hold on. No.
All right,
Cherie,
yes.
we both pride ourselves on the fact
God
that
damn it.
we want to know as many true things about this world that we live in and as few false things as possible, right? And because of that, we want to follow where the evidence guides us. And so if it turns out we're wrong, we want to know so that we can learn and we can grow. We don't set on something and say, it doesn't matter what you say, I'm just going to believe it, you know, or just prove you wrong. That's something that religious faith does. We are very much against that because that does not get us to truth. It just gets stubborn, pig-headed, you know, arguing. And that's not valuable for anyone. So I don't think that you are the kind of person who would sit here and, you know, if in evidence, right? If you had physical, tangible proof about something, you wouldn't stick your fingers in your ears and close your eyes and la, 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 right? You would try to understand what is true, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's why I was a non-believer for so long, because I believed that. I believed that there was no God. I believed that we're just here because I don't even know what I believed back then, how we got here. But I was believing in what people were teaching me about, that there was no God. And we're just here because, and atoms and gases. And I said, well, where did they come from?
Cherie, you are saying 2 million things that you said a whole lot of things that I would love to address. We can't get to all of them today.
She touched on one thing I want to bring up, though, that I don't want to leave hanging, and that's that you were saying if you have, you know, you feel like you have, you know, something that's happening in your brain that you're worried about, you're concerned about, and you're like, they can't just go in and x-ray it. First of all, if you're concerned about something with your brain, I would recommend getting an fMRI. You can get brain scans, you can go and get stuff tested out.
I've had all that stuff. I got anxiety.
The other thing is, just because you can't see something physically, there are other ways to test it. There are other senses. There are other things that we can, you know, if someone comes along, we don't have... The entire field of neuroscience it's a very brand new field. It's only been in the last few decades that we've really started to kind of peel back the layers of the onion to understand how the brain works. And we don't know exactly how the brain works. We know certain regions are associated with certain functions. We know that without a brain, you can't live. We know if you get hit in the head, you go unconscious. You know, we know that it's all rooted in this brain. It comes from the brain, but we don't know the details of how. That doesn't mean that we can't test it. And when we say that we can't see the proof, we don't necessarily mean physically see things with our eyes. Sometimes you can test things and you can get a reading on a piece of paper that tells you, you know, what something is chemically made of, that you need an instrument for. Sometimes you can hear things. Sometimes you can observe the way that people behave, the way that they react. And if you're like, oh my goodness, I just started, you know, feeling extreme, you know, anxiety or panic, or I started hearing noises, you know, we're not disregarding that happens. In fact, I would say that experience is very real to you. That those things...
Oh, it is.
Seeing those things, feeling those things, hearing those things...
Scary.
I completely acknowledge that you're experiencing that. I would just argue that we know that parts of the brain can cause that you can put electrodes on your brain and stimulate certain regions and you can cause it naturally. So those are ways that we can physically test, and all the evidence seems to indicate that your brain is able to do that on its own. And so because we can all have these experiences, and you can have, you know, a Sufi Muslim who's in this, you know, trance-like state who's experiencing a very similar thing as Pentecostals when the music comes on, and they all describe it the same way. it shows me that, you know, we're all biologically similar enough that there's no reason to believe that it's not something that's outside of the natural world, that it's outside of our brains.
Can I piggyback on that really quick? I also have anxiety and depression. I've actually been diagnosed.
So you understand how I feel.
Yeah, I've actually been diagnosed with clinical depression. It's something that I'm going to have for the rest of my life, right?
And me too.
Yeah,
so
I'm
have
so
I.
sorry.
Me too. I'm sorry for you as well. It's awful.
Yeah, I know exactly. That's my heart goes out to you. If we connect on anything, it's that. But you would know then, like I do, that we have been able to determine that there are feel-good chemicals in your brain, and a lack of those chemicals interacting in your brain can cause that, right? You have your four main, right? You have your serotonin, dopamine, you have your, what else do we got? Endorphins and oxytocin, I think. But there are medications that can help change that brain chemistry, right? There are serotonin reuptake inhibitors. There are just a bunch of, things like that. And using those...
mood stabilizers.
Yeah.
You just can't solve it, though.
Hold on. Using those, we've been able to determine that lessens the impact of that depression. So with this process, what we've done is we've been able to get closer and closer and closer to understanding it. We're not at the same place we were 500 years ago. There were people who would see somebody who said that they heard voices and they wouldn't think, oh my gosh, we need to, treat this as a mental illness. Instead, it was this person is possessed. Right? We're growing
My
as
niece
a
is
society.
like that.
Yeah.
She was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. She hears voices.
And we understand now that there's a biological component, a chemical component that we can treat together. Right? And I'm sure you would agree with me that there are people who say they can hear Elvis or whatever. And, what I'm trying to say is not everybody who hears voices is actually hearing, spirits or something like that. And so what we're doing is we're going back to that toolbox and we're determining how can we tell one from the other, right? Mm-hmm. And so I want to give you just a few pieces, and if you don't think they're good tools, then you don't have to use them, but they've been very good tools for me, okay? So the main one that I want to give you right now is, the saying is what is it? The plural of anecdote is not evidence. And what that means is if you have a whole bunch of people who are saying, oh, hey, this is true, that doesn't necessarily make it true. I mean, I think that if you're a Christian, you could probably believe fakes that you don't believe in. They say it's true, but you would say that that's not true, right? There are
I don't know.
There are spirit healers.
I can't say that for sure, because when I was in the hospital or working there and the nursing homes, when people lay close to death, the Christians, they will always, literally, either ask me or say they see angels. Or some of my patients, they had dementia. They didn't even know their own spouse's children when they came, but yet they know long lost relatives, and they tell me, well, they're standing right there. When I be like, well, where is she at or he at? Don't you see George? He's standing right there with the angel. And this is several occasions that this has happened, and I'm like, everybody don't have the brain, same brain waves. No, actually, scientifically, it's been proven that we don't.
Well, hold on.
If we had the same activity, I forgot your name, but if we all had the exact same, everybody...
My name's Eric.
Eric would be depressed. Everybody would have schizophrenia. Everybody would have... But we don't, because our brain...
Well, can I tell you
what... That takes what I said out of context.
Can I take the science of that real quick and lay out where it's the same and where it's different?
Yeah, please.
The neurons, the way that neurons are built is the same in every single human. The way that the neurons are organized is different. and the chemical balances are different from person to person. So all of us have serotonin, all of us have dopamine, all of us have these chemicals, and the chemical structure of these chemicals is identical from me to you to someone on the street. And it's the difference is in the quantities. So I might have a lesser amount, or I might have fewer receptors, or my neurons might be organized a little bit differently. But as far as the hardware, the basic hardware, all of our brains, we're working with the same materials. We're working with the same stuff. So when a doctor studies someone's brain, they may be able to run do a genetic test and map out your genome and say, hey, you're more likely to respond better to this drug than someone else, because you're more likely to have this genetic illness than someone else. But what they're doing, they're not saying your brain is completely different. It's like an alien brain and it doesn't even have these chemicals. They're looking and they're saying we know enough about how these chemicals work and how brains work to figure out what's different from yours from someone whose brain doesn't have this condition.
That's actually
like
exactly.
I said, we don't all have the same, so for them to all see the same.
But we all have human brains.
Well, you know what? I would love to keep going, but I really do have to get ready for work. But we all are genetically together. DNA. Yeah. From animals to humans to everything. How is that possible? The Bible teaches me that Eve is the mother of all living. There's no way I can have anything from me to you if we're not connected some way. That's not possible.
I think that is a wonderful claim that there's evidence that you need to actually show. But I think that is a wonderful, wonderful place to end it. Because, Cherie, hold on.
Then we got the same DNA.
So, going back, I'll say that it is better when you don't know something to say, I don't know. You give yourself permission to explore and to learn. And that's how we've been able to come up with everything that we have. Hold on,
find out why that is.
And yeah, we have. If you want to go to school to learn it and study it, you are absolutely welcome to.
I also would recommend, it's very hard to explain abiogenesis in, a couple sentences, but I did a very, very laser-focused series called The Story of Life. If you type in Holy Kool-Aid, The Story of Life on YouTube. And
what? I'm sorry, fully what?
Holy Kool-Aid. As in, don't drink the Kool-Aid.
They support each other like game show hosts.
I've seen that. Janet just sent the link to me.
Okay. But in The Story of Life, I start walking through, and it's still a work in progress. I'm going to expand, all the way up into modern humans. But I talk about what we know and how we know it, about how life can arise naturally, how things like RNA and DNA can come about, and all of this stuff, and how it's all chemistry. It's all basically chemicals, and we know that, and we can observe that under a microscope today. And so just because maybe these fields may be new, or they may be something that, I may not understand something, that doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. That doesn't mean that we can't learn how it happened together. And that's the beautiful thing about the world.
You don't know has never gotten us anywhere. I don't know has gotten us a lot of places. But I know you've got to go to work. I really, really appreciate you calling in. This has been a nice talk.
Oh, no problem.
You take care.
It was a good chat with you guys.
Cherie, it's been a pleasure.
Bye.
You too. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Aw. You know what?
Go straight for Job in Los Angeles. That's on line 1. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello?
Hello, is this Job?
Joe, yes.
Oh, just Joe. The call screener got it wrong. Why have you forsaken me, call screener? How's it going, Joe?
Good. And you?
Yeah, what's up? You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm just calling because my atheist friend told me to call.
Oh, okay. Thanks, atheist friend.
Yeah, his name's Tom. I'd like to give a shout out to Tom.
Hey, Tom.
God damn it.
So what's up?
Yeah, I'm just calling. I seen your guys' show. I was interested in calling and saying
God
I could learn
fucking
a thing or two,
damn it.
or maybe you could learn a thing too. But
God fucking damn it.
I want to talk about how I like
God
to
fuck it.
accept science and God.
God fucking damn it.
I mean, I know
God
science is like
fuck it.
the ultimate truth. Data is knowledge.
I don't think even scientists would characterize it that way. I think actually science is a process of investigating and discovering what's really going on in the world.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, I'm not sure any of us would want to throw around terms like ultimate truth when it comes to science.
Yeah. Well, I believe that you can have God in your life as well as accepting science as a part of life.
Well, you can have God in your life, but why would you?
Well, it really gives you hope and keep on going, because a lot of people think that there's no God and there's no hope in this world.
Is that what you think?
Excuse me?
Do you think that?
No, but I've heard a lot of people say that. I've even seen this movie called God Is Not Dead, and in the movie they say that in the end, how if there's no God, there's no hope, right? Well,
no hope of
I'm
what?
not saying that's entirely right, but...
Well, yeah. No hope of what? If there's no God, there's no hope of what?
People... some people would think that there's no hope in the afterlife, that they would go insane in this life and not caring and doing whatever they want.
Do you think that?
Without... No.
Well, let's talk about let's talk about what you believe instead of talking about what other people believe.
Yeah,
because they're not here to talk about their
you understand that God's not dead is Christian propaganda,
but more to the point, you're saying that you accept both God and science. And Russell was asking, why would you accept God, and then you moved to other people's beliefs.
Why would I accept God? Because I never doubted God in my life, and God has shown me that He's there. Through the bad and good, mostly bad, but I've seen many people in my life, and a lot of them that don't believe in God have something in common.
Can you explain how God has shown you that He's there?
Yeah, just every person I meet, I learn something new from them, and I believe that God puts these people in my life for a reason.
But why do you believe that God has put those people there? Like, where
God fucking damn it.
In fact, I know more people that